I know what I saw that night. No matter how many times people tell me I was just scared or tired or whatever excuses they come up with to help themselves sleep better, I know. And I'll carry that knowledge with me until the day I die. You see, cemeteries don't scare me. Never did. That's probably why I agreed to go in the first place. I'm the one who said yes when the others weren't sure. I'm the one who laughed and called it just a bit of fun. But nothing about that night was fun. Nothing about what we found was normal. And none of us walked away the same. It started with a rumor. Every small town has them, you know? That weird local legend everyone knows but no one takes seriously. Ours was about Hillcrest Cemetery, just off County Road 9. The story went that if you went there at night, you'd hear motorized whirring, like engines or machines, but you'd never see what caused it. Some people said it was an old caretaker who went missing years ago, still wandering around on his golf cart at night. Others claimed it was something darker, grave robbers with power tools, or worse. Honestly, I never gave it much thought until that Friday night in October. There were 4 of us, me, Trevor, Riley, and Matt. Typical suburban high school juniors bored out of our minds with nothing to do after the football game. We'd snuck a few beers and were driving around, looking for something to kill the time. That's when Trevor brought up Hillcrest. You know, he said, taking a swig and leaning back in the passenger seat, I heard someone dug up a grave out there last week. Like freshly dug. Sheriff's department came out and everything. I laughed. Yeah, okay. And I bet the undead caretaker tried to chase them off on his lawnmower. I'm serious, dude, he insisted. My cousin's friend works at the sheriff's office. Said they found tire marks. Like something big was being hauled out. That got our attention. Riley, who was driving, raised an eyebrow. You mean like, a coffin? Trevor shrugged, grinning like an idiot. Only one way to find out. Now, normal people might have let that conversation end there. But we weren't normal that night. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was just the cocky fearlessness of being 17, but within the hour we were standing at the rusted iron gate of Hillcrest Cemetery, flashlights in hand, breath fogging in the cold night air. The place was dead quiet. No pun intended. Just rows of headstones stretching into the dark, framed by twisted oaks and half-dead shrubs. The ground was uneven, littered with dry leaves that crunched underfoot no matter how softly we tried to step. It didn't take long to find the grave Trevor had mentioned. It was near the back, in a part of the cemetery that looked older, worn headstones with barely legible names, many of them cracked or tilted. And sure enough, one grave stood out. The dirt was fresh. Uneven. Like it had been hastily refilled. Riley shined his flashlight over the grave, the beam catching something shiny at the edge of the disturbed soil. Yo, what is that? He asked, stepping closer. Trevor knelt and picked it up, brushing off the dirt. It was a bolt cutter. Rusted, but still sturdy. And weirdly warm. Before we could say anything, we heard it. A low, mechanical whir, like an engine starting up in the distance. Then another. Coming from the trees beyond the fence. We froze. Matt laughed nervously. Okay, who the hell brings power tools to a cemetery? Trevor was staring into the dark, squinting. You guys hear that clicking? We all fell silent. Click, click, click. A rhythmic, unnatural sound, growing louder. Closer. Followed by the unmistakable crunch of leaves, something moving. Fast. Dude, screw this, Riley said, backing away. But I couldn't move. Because in that moment, I realized something that made my blood run cold. There were no tire marks around the fresh grave. There were tracks. Like tank treads. Or conveyor belts. And then I saw it. Just for a second, illuminated by the edge of Riley's flashlight beam before it flickered and died. Something tall. Metal. With arms. And it was moving toward us. Riley's flashlight flickered, sputtered, and went dark. And for a moment we were blind. Then light harsh and sudden blazed from the trees beyond the fence. A spotlight? Headlamp? It cut through the fog like a knife, catching on the headstones, lighting up the fresh grave like a crime scene. Trevor dropped the bolt cutter with a sharp clang and stepped back. What the hell is that? The sound we heard before, the whir, was louder now. But it wasn't an engine. Not exactly. It was a generator. That distinct chugging hum. And something else layered underneath it, something sharper. A buzzing. Like a saw spinning to life. And then came the voices. Not normal voices. Not yelling. Not conversation. Just a chanting. Low rhythmic. Muted by distance but wrong enough to make my skin crawl. Riley hissed, go. Go, go, go. We ran quiet as we could, but the leaves betrayed us with every step. The spotlight behind us shifted, panning across the graves. Searching. Matt ducked behind a crumbling statue, gasping for air. What the hell is going on? Are those people? I didn't answer. Couldn't. My heart was hammering too loud in my ears. Then Trevor, who had crept back a few feet toward the fresh grave, froze. "Guys," he whispered. "I think there's someone in the pit." "What?" Riley barked too loud. Trevor didn't move. "I heard something." From inside. Before I could stop him, Trevor stepped toward the grave again, flashlight shaking in his grip. He knelt at the edge of the disturbed dirt, hands trembling, and brushed some of it aside. "Trevor, get away from there," I warned. He didn't. He just stared, pale as death. "There's chains," he breathed. They chained it shut. And then, suddenly, movement. From inside the grave. A hand, bloody, raw, shot up from the dirt. We screamed. Trevor stumbled backward, but he didn't get far. Because from behind a tree a figure stepped out. Not a machine. Not a ghost. A man. He wore coveralls, stained and torn, and a welding mask over his face. In his hands, a power saw. Gas-powered. Humming to life in a roar of teeth and steel. On his belt? More tools. Things meant for cutting through wood, through metal, through flesh. He didn't say a word. Just raised the saw. Trevor didn't even scream when it hit him. The saw struck his shoulder first, violent, brutal, a spray of red mist in the beam of Riley's flashlight. Trevor collapsed, twitching, gurgling, his legs kicking in the leaves. The man didn't stop. Just kept cutting, sawing, until the sound drowned out Trevor's dying breaths. We ran. I don't remember much of that sprint, just trees whipping past, branches clawing at my face, and the sound of that saw fading behind us. We didn't stop until we reached the far fence. Barbed wire. High. Too high. Matt dropped to his knees, vomiting, shaking uncontrollably. "What the hell was that?" he sobbed. "Who the hell was that?" I couldn't answer. Couldn't think. All I knew was that Trevor was dead and we were next if we didn't get out. Riley scanned the tree line. "We have to find a break in the fence. There's gotta be." A snap. Twigs behind us. We spun around. More lights appeared in the woods, lanterns, maybe? Flashlights? More men. They were coming out of the trees, slow and steady, tools in hand. One had a sledgehammer. Another had what looked like bolt cutters, the same kind Trevor had found. Their faces hidden by masks, gas masks, welding helmets, ski masks, anything to keep themselves anonymous. They didn't speak. Just moved in silence. Like they'd done this before. And then I heard it again. The chanting. Not in English. Not words I recognized. I grabbed Matt. "Move. Now." We found a section of fence where the barbed wire was loose. Riley helped Matt over. I climbed last, tearing my hand open on the rusted metal. Blood poured down my wrist, but I didn't care. Behind us, one of the men was at the base of the fence, watching. Just watching. And in the distance, I heard the generator again. And the sound of digging. They weren't grave robbers. They weren't caretakers. They were builders. Building something in the dark with parts they had no right to. We ran until we couldn't feel our legs. Blood from my torn hand soaked my sleeve, and every heartbeat made the wound throb harder. But we didn't stop. Not even when we reached the edge of the cemetery and found the woods again. Dark and endless. Riley turned to me, panting hard. "Where the hell are we?" I didn't know. All I knew was that the road, our car, was somewhere back through Hillcrest. And going back? That wasn't an option. Matt collapsed against a tree, still shaking. "We have to call someone. The cops. Anyone." Riley's voice cracked. "With what?" "Our phones are in the damn car." That hit hard. I felt sick. Like the world had narrowed down to three things. Blood, breath, and the sound of those men. That saw. Trevor's scream. His eyes when the man in the mask. I forced myself to stop thinking. Focus. "Look," I said. "There's gotta be a house nearby. This property has to border something. We just have to keep moving." We headed deeper into the woods, not knowing where we were going, branches ripping at our clothes. Then the trees opened up, and we saw lights. A small cabin. Old, boarded windows. Dim light flickering inside, like a lantern. There was a beat-up pickup truck beside it, caked in mud. We hesitated. Matt whispered, "What if it's them?" I stared at the cabin, then at the truck. License plate was missing. Something about it felt off. "We check it out," I said. "But stay ready to run." We crept up, slow and silent. The front door was slightly open, creaking in the wind. No sound inside. Riley pushed it open with the end of a branch. The smell hit us first. Bleach, gasoline, and something rotten underneath. The room was a mess. Tools, ropes, buckets of God knows what. A workbench covered in black plastic. And on the wall, photos, dozens of them pinned and stained. Graves. Photos of graves, some open, some not. Close-up shots of headstones. Names. Dates. And faces. Trevor's face. Our faces. Matt stumbled backward, knocking over a bucket. It spilled across the floor with a slosh. And inside were teeth. Human teeth. Some still red. He started screaming. I slapped a hand over his mouth. Quiet! I hissed. They're close, I swear. Boom. The door behind us slammed shut. We spun around. And there he was. Not a mask this time. Just a man. Older. Scruffy beard. Eyes like stone. He held a shotgun but didn't raise it. You boys lost? He asked, voice rough as gravel. We didn't answer. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, barring it with a steel rod. You shouldn't be here, he said. This land's not yours. You've seen things you don't understand. Riley stepped forward, fists clenched. What the hell is going on? Who are you people? The man's face didn't change. They come to us. The forgotten. The lost. You wouldn't understand the purpose. But there's balance in it. We don't waste. We build. Always have. He gestured to the table. You see graves. We see supply. Flesh rots. Bone lasts. That's when I realized those machines we saw? Not machines. People. Wearing metal. Built into it. Shackled to it. Operated like tools themselves. They weren't using power tools, they were the tools. I felt bile rise in my throat. You kill people, Matt whispered. You dig them up. You use them. The man finally smiled. We don't kill. We repurpose. I lost it. I grabbed the nearest thing. A hammer, and swung. Hit him in the side of the head. He stumbled, dropped the shotgun. Riley dove for it. We ran again. Out the door, into the dark. Leaving the cabin and its horror behind. Behind us, the man didn't chase. He just laughed. Like we'd already lost. We ran until we reached another clearing and found it. Pit. Huge. Freshly dug. Inside, rows of bodies, half-stripped. Some with metal braces on their limbs, pipes through their spines. A workshop of human remains. This wasn't a cemetery. It was a harvest ground. And we were just next. We stood at the edge of that pit like deer frozen in headlights. The bodies inside weren't just buried, they were arranged. Stacked like lumber, stripped of anything personal. Some missing arms, legs, faces. Others fitted with metal braces, bolts driven into bone, hooks where hands should be. And at the bottom? Tools. Not the kind you find at Home Depot. Custom-built horror. Devices for tearing, fastening, draining. All of it soaked in black-red filth. Matt started to cry again. Quiet, broken sobs. I want to go home. I just want to go home. Riley turned away, vomiting into the grass. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. And then we heard it. A scream. Not Trevor. This was new. Younger. A girl. We locked eyes. Did you hear that? Riley whispered. Another scream, this time muffled. Closer. We followed it, skirting the pit, hearts thundering in our chests. Every shadow looked like a figure, every branch a hand reaching for us. Then we saw it, an old mausoleum, stone cracked and covered in moss, hidden behind the trees. Light flickered inside. Someone's in there, I said. We approached, slow, our shoes squelching in the mud. The door was open, just a crack. Inside was hell. The room was lit by a single hanging bulb, swaying slightly. In the middle, a table, stained dark. And strapped to it, a girl. Alive. Gagged, wrists tied, eyes wide and pleading. She kicked against her restraints, trying to scream through the cloth. I ran to her, tearing the gag free. We're getting you out, don't scream, please. Her mouth opened, breath ragged. They're coming. He's here. Footsteps outside. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. I turned to the others. Block the door. Too late. A figure stepped inside, filling the doorway. One of them. A man in bloody butcher's gear, face covered in a plague doctor's mask, the beak cracked and stained. In his hand a drill. The kind used in construction, but modified, longer, sharper. He didn't speak. He charged. That was the closest. He tried to run. Didn't make it. The drill slammed into his side, punching through with a wet crunch. He screamed, shrill and high-pitched, blood spraying across the stone floor. Riley tackled the man, but he was strong, inhumanly so. The drill whirred back to life, spinning wildly, and the man swung it, catching Riley across the shoulder. Bone split. He hit the floor, screaming. I grabbed a rusted metal bar from the wall and swung. The first hit knocked the mask loose, revealing a face twisted by rage and scars, eyes dead and cold. The second hit dropped him. I didn't stop until he stopped moving. Blood pooled under him. Not enough. Not enough. We freed the girl. Her name was Casey. Local. Said they took her 2 days ago, they were going to fit her next. I didn't ask what that meant. Riley was dying. Pale. Shaking. I can't feel my arm, he gasped. Save it, I told him. You're gonna live. Lies. The girl led us through the back of the mausoleum down a hidden stone stairwell. She said it was the only way out. She said the exit was at the bottom. I didn't trust it. But we had no choice. The stairs wound down deep. The air grew thick, damp. We passed old coffins, bones littering the ground. Then we reached it, a tunnel. Stone walls. Narrow. Lined with cages. Inside? People. Or what was left of them. Limbs removed. Eyes gone. Some crying. Some begging. Others smiling, vacant. Conditioned. We ran past. Couldn't stop. A loudspeaker crackled. A voice calm. Male. Controlled. You've come far enough. We won't let you leave with our property. A trap. Lights blazed. Doors slammed. We were sealed in. Footsteps. Many. They were coming. And Riley was bleeding out. I looked at Casey. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. Like she knew this would happen. The tunnel was silent now, except for Riley's labored breathing and the steady drip of blood from his arm. I tore my hoodie into strips, trying to stanch it, but it was bad, too bad. Casey crouched beside him, hand on his shoulder, whispering things I couldn't hear. Comforting words, maybe? Or last rites. The loudspeaker crackled again. You can't save him, the voice said. Let him go and we'll spare the girl. Just walk away. I looked at her. She didn't flinch. Didn't cry. She looked empty. Riley gripped my wrist, eyes wide. Don't leave me. I swallowed. Never. We moved slowly through the tunnel. No sound behind us. No footsteps. But they didn't need to chase us. They knew we were trapped. At the end of the passage, a steel door stood half open. Faint light leaked through. Casey froze. That's the exit. We pushed through and stopped cold. We were back inside the cemetery. A clearing. A circle of graves. And the men in masks are ringing us in silence. At least 10 of them. Tools in hand. No fear in their movements. They'd done this before. In the center of the circle, an open grave, deep, freshly dug. Waiting. For us. The loudspeaker's voice echoed around us, but now it was closer. The source stepped forward. No mask. An older man in clean clothes, collared shirt, jacket. He looked like a principal. Or someone's dad. There are rules in this world, he said calmly. Life. Death. Waste. We eliminate the waste. We make use of what's left. Bodies. Bones. It's not murder. It's purpose. His eyes locked on Casey. She understands. Don't you, dear? I felt cold all over. Riley whispered, what's he talking about? Casey's face twisted. Sad. Regretful. I'm sorry, she said. Then she stepped away from us. The men didn't stop her. She led us here, I realized, voice hollow. You set us up. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't deny it. They said they'd let me go, she whispered. They said if I brought someone alive, they'd let me walk. Riley groaned, falling to the ground. The man in the collared shirt stepped closer, smiling faintly. And she did well. But deals change. He nodded. 2 men grabbed her. Her scream tore the night apart. I snapped. Grabbed Riley's blood-slicked arm, hauled him up. We ran. Through the ring of men, ducking, dodging. One tried to grab me, I drove my elbow into his throat. Heard him gasp. We broke the line. The sound behind us was chaos. Shouts. Footsteps. Casey's screams fading. We crashed through the trees, through the cemetery gates, onto the road. Headlights. A car. I waved frantically, blood flying. The vehicle skidded to a stop. A man stepped out, phone in hand, eyes wide. He called the cops. We were safe. Or so I thought. It's been months since that night. No bodies found. No cult. No open graves. The sheriff said we were drunk, delusional. Trevor? Missing person. Case cold. Matt? Dead. Riley? He doesn't talk anymore. Just stares. Flinches at every sound. And Casey? Gone. No record of her. No missing report. Sometimes I hear the whir of tools outside my window at night. Sometimes I wake up to scratches on my door. I know they're watching. Waiting. because I didn't fall into that grave. But someone else will. They're still building. And we're all just parts. Thank you very much for watching this video to the end. I will be very pleased if you subscribe to the channel and like this video.